I'm returned with another interesting, another Voice of Freedom program. I'm telling you, this is unusual. Normally I interview people, but this one is the story of a lady called Christine Miller. She's a school teacher in the United States, and she is also of German background. She came to the United States as a young woman and married quite a famous American doctor. So the reason why I'm saying she married a famous American doctor is because most people use the excuse that, oh, my husband's career or my own career, in this case as a school teacher, would be jeopardized if I spoke out. Well, this tape will show you that in the United States, where citizens have First Amendment protection, you can speak out and you can survive. There is, of course, controversy, there is vilification, there are nasty letters to the editor against you, and your superiors look upon it askance if you do what Christine Miller did, and you can still survive it, unscathed, as it turns out. Christine Miller had had enough. She had children that she raised, and she said they were getting one-sided education. The schools wherein she taught also had only one version of World War II history, especially when it came to the Holocaust. And so Christine Miller said, enough is enough. I want balance. We deserve balance. America has always been about you being able to speak your mind. And so she began to talk to her superiors. She began to go to see the librarians, ask that certain books be included for balance. And so this tape is the story, the presentation that this lady, Christine Miller, American school teacher of German background, made. I thought it would be a good idea for our audience to see that, because I've always hoped that many, many more people would emulate Christine Miller, would go and put programs, our programs, on public access, would write letters to the editor, would go to see their school boards, insist on their libraries showing more balance and so on. So this is, in my eyes, the story of an ordinary but a heroic woman, Christine Miller. This is the first segment. There will be a segment number 2.
Good afternoon. I'm Carol McCart. I'm the Dean at your University of Wisconsin Center, Marshfield Wood County. And it is indeed a pleasure to welcome all of you this afternoon, and it's also my task to introduce Mrs. Christine Miller, who is going to speak to us today on her views of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany.
I'm here to refute gas chambers and thereby the Holocaust. But it is a fact that Adolf Hitler wanted the Jews out of Germany. There were 3 reasons. Number 1, the Balfour Declaration. In 1917, England promised international Jewry a homeland in Palestine. International Jewry, which until this time was rather pro-German, shifted sides and became pro-English. Adolf Hitler, therefore, looked upon the Jews as a potentially disloyal element, and he wanted them out of Germany. When he came to power in 1933, he enacted discriminatory laws against the Jews which disenfranchised them. Many Jews left. Number 2, the communist threat. In 1917, the United States entered the war on the side of England and France and thereby decided the war. Germany entered a period of general misery, starvation, and internal turmoil. Now there were 2 ideologies coming to the forefront, fighting for the soul of Germany. You had on one hand the National Socialist German Workers' Party, in short the Nazis, and on the other hand you had the communists. The Nazis were national in outlook, to the right, and promoted what nowadays goes under the name of family values. They outlawed abortion on demand and closed the gay bars. The communists were international in outlook. Let me stress it again. The communists were international in outlook. They were to the left and they had a liberal agenda. They promoted abortion on demand and women's lib. Now, the leadership of that German Communist Party was in Jewish hand, and they looked to Russia for their cue. Russia just had undergone a revolution. Again, they looked to Russia for their cue. Let me name a few names: Rosa Luxemburg, Karl Liebknecht, Ernst Thälmann, and Kurt Eisner. Kurt Eisner, in 1918, ousted the Bavarian monarchy. The king and his family had to flee, and he established a short-lived communist republic in Bavaria. He called that communist republic the Räterepublik. Now let me explain to you the name Räte. Räte is the plural of Rat and means in English counselor, wise men. That is exactly what the word Soviet means. So Räterepublik and Soviet Republic are the same word. Now these two parties fought it out in the streets of Germany. Let me, in order to give you a feel for the atmosphere of that time, let me translate for you the Nazi anthem, which goes under the name Horst Wessel song. Hoist the flag, close the ranks. SR marches with quiet, determined steps. Comrades which were shot by the Red Front, notice the word Red Front. Red Front stands for communists. So the Nazis which were shot by the communists and reactionaries march with us in spirit. Clears the street for the brown battalions, clears the street for the SR. Millions already look towards the swastika full of hope. The day for freedom and bread is near. For the last time sounds the rally, we are already prepared for battle. Soon Hitler flags will fly over all the streets. The time of servitude will last not much longer. Servitude, he means the servitude to the Treaty of Versailles. Now let me make a short side trip. In a number of Holocaust books, especially in the children's sections, there are two books, I think 3 books in the Marshfield Junior High School library. In these books, the writers claim that the lines, "When Jewish blood spurts from the knife, then things go twice as well," that these lines are in the Horst Wessel song. That is a lie. I just translated that song for you. These lines would never fit. I looked in all the other Nazi songs. I have here an old songbook, Sing Kamerad, and this has been published in 1938. There's no song in this book which contains these lines. Now, the third reason why Adolf Hitler wanted the Jews out of Germany was the decadence of the Weimar Republic. Adolf Hitler felt, rightly or wrongly, that the Jews were an element which promoted decadence and immorality. Now, when Bob Dole attacked Hollywood, that was vintage Adolf Hitler. In many people's mind, Hollywood is associated with Jews. In 1939, the war broke out and all the international borders were closed. Now all the combatants, let me stress that, all the combatants put segments of their population whom they did not trust into camps. The Americans put the Japanese into camps and some Germans. The English interned every German whom they found within their dominion. The Russians depopulated whole regions of their country and put Russians with German ancestry into camps. They mostly wound up in Siberia. The Germans put the Jews into camps. How the inmates fared in these camps did not so very much depend on the good or ill will of the country which put him there, but it depended on the resources of the country. If the country had plenty of food, the inmates could expect to be decently fed. Not enough food, and the inmates starved. That was the case in Russia, and that was the case in Germany, but only towards the end of the war. Now we come to 1945. With the beginning of 1945, the war was coming to a close. By this time, the English and Americans had gained air superiority, and they used that air superiority to destroy, to incinerate German cities and its inhabitants. They destroyed the infrastructure, especially the railroad system. Trucks and cars on the road were machine gunned from the air. At the same time, while this happened, the Russian front was coming closer, and the Germans started to evacuate the inmates of the eastern camps like Auschwitz. These inmates were pushed into camps within the center of Germany like Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau. Now the number of inmates just doubled and tripled and quadrupled at the very same time when these camps could no longer be adequately supplied. The sanitation system broke down, epidemics broke out, and the inmates died like flies. The bodies could no longer be disposed of. Now, when the English and Americans entered these camps, the sight and sound and smell was horrible. Needlessly to say, they took plenty of pictures and newsreels and then sent them around the world. And thereby hangs the Holocaust tale. For the sake of simplicity, let me confine myself to 6 camps. 6 camps. Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau on one hand, and Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Treblinka on the other hand. Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau were camps within the center of Germany, going east to west. This region was conquered and occupied by the English and the Americans. Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Treblinka were camps in what is now Polish territory. That area was conquered and occupied by the Russians. As I mentioned before, when the Russians entered these camps, they found abandoned camps because the inmates, as I just mentioned before, had been evacuated to the camps in the center of Germany. Now the lie that there were gas chambers came out of Auschwitz. But the credibility to the lie came from the horrible conditions within the center of Germany, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau. Now to another very important point. There are two versions of the Holocaust. The first version was promoted right after the war until about the 60s, 70s. This version was faded out, and the new version, which is still promoted, was blended in. In the first version, the Germans were supposed to have had gas chambers in camps within the center of Germany, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau. That lie was dropped. But the fact that the lie had been dropped was never publicized. Now, the second version, which is still promoted, lists these camps, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau, as concentration camps in stark contrast to the death camps or the extermination camps, Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Treblinka. Now, why was the lie dropped for the camps within the center of Germany? Very simple. There were too many political prisoners in these camps who, for the sake of truth and fairness, put their resentment of being falsely imprisoned aside and said, no gas chambers at Buchenwald, no gas chambers at Dachau, no gas chambers at Bergen-Belsen. I want to especially mention one man, a Frenchman, Paul Racinier, who was imprisoned in Buchenwald and was horrified after the war when he heard his fellow inmates talk about gas chambers. Now, why do I refute gas chambers? I would call myself an expert on Holocaust literature. Whenever my husband goes to meetings, I go with him, he goes to his meeting, I go to the library and check out the Holocaust section and check out if there are any new books. Now, what I'm reading in these books was logistically and technically simply not possible. Number two, let's just talk about Auschwitz. There are a number of books on Auschwitz, all the versions differ. Just depending what version you read. Okay, now just you read that 900, 1,000, 4,000 Jews were pushed into the gas chamber, and then the gas, the Cyclone B, again depending what version you are reading, the Cyclone B was dropped in. And when, after half an hour, the Jews were all supposed to have been dead, and then the door was opened, and poof, the gas was gone. That is not possible. Gas, which just half an hour ago killed such a multitude of people, doesn't suddenly disappear that fast. Now, Werber in his book, I Cannot Forget, says that every 15 minutes a body was incinerated. That is not possible. Now, I'm not going to make it easy on you. I'm not going to tell you how long it takes to incinerate a body. Find out for yourself. Call the crematorium at Warsaw. Now, Raoul Hilberg, however, has another method how the Germans disposed of the Jews. Let me read to you. That is from the book The Destruction of the European Jews, Raoul Hilberg, page 251. Moll directed the digging of 8 or 9 pits, more than 40 yards in length, 8 yards wide, and 6 feet deep. On the bottom of the pits, the human fat was collected and poured back into the fire with buckets to hasten cremation. Now that is not possible. This good professor confuses 2 processes. He confuses roasting with burning. In case there are a number of Professor Hilbergs among you, let me explain the difference to you. When you roast meat, you use the heat of the meat, but not the fire of the meat. The heat of the meat will draw out the fat, and then you can use it. When you burn meat, you put the meat into the fire. But fat is highly combustible. Fat will burn first. Meat is 70% water. So what Professor Hilberg says simply could not have been done. The fat would never have collected at the bottom of the pit. Now I want to mention something else to you what Professor Hilberg writes. He repeats a rumor. He tells of Jewish girls whom they injected with strychnine. Dillevano looked on, smoking a cigarette, as did his friends, and they saw how these girls were dying. Immediately after that, the corpses were cut into small pieces, mixed with horse meat, and boiled into soap. Here you have the soap story again. Now that is silly. Anybody who knows how to make soap realizes that couldn't be done. You wouldn't get soap, you would get a stinking mess. Soap is made from mainly 2 ingredients, lye and fat, not meat. Number 2, there is no documentary evidence. Now the documents, the German documents, were brought to the United States. They were looked over. What they didn't find, they have not yet found an extermination order. The word Gaskammer, gas chamber, does not appear. So the whole Holocaust story rests on one thing alone. It rests on eyewitness reports. Now let me remind you of Demjanjuk. Demjanjuk was supposed to have been the butcher of Treblinka. He was extradited from the United States to Israel, and he was put on trial in Israel. Now I remember watching TV. One of the eyewitnesses went up to Demjanjuk, looked into his eyes and said, "I can see it in his eyes. He is the butcher of Treblinka." Demjanjuk was freed by Israel because he never was at Treblinka. Now we come to the Leuchter report. Leuchter, a designer of execution equipment and, in quote, an expert on gas chambers, he checked out gas chambers in the United States, went to Auschwitz and took stone samples from the supposed gas chambers. Before I go on, let me explain to you the properties of Cyclone B. Cyclone B, by the way, is the trade name of hydrocyanic acid. Now, hydrocyanic acid combines with masonry and forms a stable compound, ferroferric cyanide. This ferroferric cyanide produces blue staining. So anyhow, Leuchter went to Auschwitz, shipped out stone samples from the supposed gas chambers, and as a control, he shipped out stone samples from what is still officially designated as delousing chambers. He brought the stone samples back to the United States. They were examined in a laboratory in Massachusetts, and what they found out, there was, I show it to you just a second. This is the Leuchter report. If you want to read it, it is in the Marshfield Library. It took some doing before they would accept it, but they finally accepted it. Now here, the yellow is the amount of quantity of ferroferric cyanide in the officially designated delousing chamber. From here to here. Now down here, barely noticeable are the remnants of ferroferric cyanide in the chambers which you were told were gas chambers. As you can see, no comparison. These rooms, which you were told were used as gas chambers, could not have been used as gas chambers because there was no or such very small quantities of ferric ferrocyanide. By the way, this Leuchter report was completely stonewalled in the American news media. In the German news media it was mentioned, but it was mentioned as a pseudo-scientific report. Now to a short excursion into Germany. In the early 80s, the German government, under enormous Jewish pressure, enacted a law which makes it a criminal offense to doubt gas chambers and the Holocaust. But one thing they no longer have to believe. They no longer have to believe that these gas chambers were in Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, in Dachau. They have to believe now the revised version. Now, this second revised version puts promoters of the Holocaust a little bit in a predicament, but not too much in a predicament, because they can count on the short memory of people, and people are not very logical. They do not notice breaks in logic. Now I want to recommend to you one book. This book, Anne Frank, Beyond the Diary. Now you have here a list of camps. Okay, that is on page 95. Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau are listed as concentration camps. Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Treblinka are listed as death camps, meaning camps with gas chambers. Now, Anne Frank and her family were deported from Amsterdam to Auschwitz. Auschwitz, as I just said before, is listed as a death camp. But she and her family were not guests there. At the end of the war, she and her family were evacuated to Bergen-Belsen, a camp which is simply listed as concentration camp, meaning a camp without gas chambers. And that's where that young girl died very shortly before the war ended, most likely of typhus. Now there are a number of books like that. For example, if you read Night by Elie Wiesel, in this book, Elie Wiesel tells about the deportation of his family from Hungary to Auschwitz. Obviously, his mother and his sister perished there. There were many epidemics in Auschwitz. So at the end of the war, in January, Elie Wiesel developed an infected and passive foot. He is given anesthesia and operated on in the Auschwitz hospital. Now that is very strange, an extermination camp and a hospital. Then, while Elie Wiesel is still recuperating, he and his father are given a choice. Do you want to stay or do you want to leave and be evacuated with the rest? Elie Wiesel and his father talked it over and they decided that they wanted to be evacuated with the rest. So both of them wound up in Buchenwald, again where his father died. He wasn't gassed in Auschwitz. He died in Buchenwald, again most likely of serious diarrhea, again very shortly before the war ended. Now to the last part. How was it possible to impose this lie on Germany, on the world? The biggest lie is readily believed if you can bait its hook with truth. The hook of truth were the horrible conditions in the camps within the center of Germany, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau. Now, second point. Germany was not only a defeated nation, it was a defeated, destroyed, and occupied nation. Now, when occupation means the country is not only controlled from the outside, but it is controlled from within. Now, can you imagine how the history books of the United States would look if Japan had won the war, not only won the war, but occupied the United States? Believe you me, they would look different. Now, the victors started immediately with a re-education campaign. Say the victors were noble and good, we the Germans were evil and bad, and even if we personally didn't gas any Jews, we did nothing to prevent it. A defense was simply not possible. The leadership in the know was hanged. Dead men tell no tales. The men who were not dead were still prisoners of war. And then Germany was put on a starvation diet. All we thought of was food, food, food again. And whatever they said about us, we had no defenses to defend ourselves against that atrocity propaganda came secondary. When I went back to school, we had no books. The first book came about 3 years after the war, and it was a history book, bound very printed on very cheap paper, and the history book naturally promoted the views of the victors. Needlessly to say, the whole education was victor controlled, it is still controlled, because Holocaust education is mandatory in the German school system. The licenses to restart a newspaper were only given to those people who promoted the views of the victors. By the way, many Jews who had left Germany in the 30s and had immigrated to the United States came back after the war, and many of these Jews were given prominent positions in the news media. Now the German archive was raided, the documents brought by the ton to the United States. Whoever controls the documents controls history. The Germans don't even have access to their own documents, much less access to the documents of the Allies. Let me close by saying that there was a Holocaust, a real Holocaust, a German Holocaust, and a Jewish Holocaust only indirectly, as the Jews were part and parcel of the German Holocaust. You cannot destroy a country and expect islands of well-being. That is hypocritical. But the victors, with the sleight of hand of the conjurer, directed the eye of the world away from the Holocaust, the German Holocaust, and to the camps, to the horrible conditions within the camps in Germany, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau. For these horrible conditions, the victors were ultimately responsible. We victors, vote to the loser.
Okay, another comment here?
This is difficult. I had no intention of coming here and saying anything. I have no question for you, and I respect your right to be what you obviously believe. There's no debate. People shouldn't. This is nothing that anyone ought to debate or enter into a discussion any more than is the earth round, or was there a civil war, or did slavery exist in the United States? People need to, I assume you do, but some of the questions I've heard, people need to understand what this is all about. Holocaust denial is a trend that is unfortunately gaining popularity. And you can come to a few conclusions. You can come to a conclusion that someone doesn't have the mental capacity to appreciate what the historical truth is, and you seem like a very intelligent person, so I would never assume that of you. You can come to the conclusion that a person might be delusional, they might have a psychiatric illness that would allow them not to be able to differentiate reality from truth, and you seem very articulate. I don't believe that of you. Or you can come to the conclusion of what this is all about, and this is about hatred, and this is about anti-Semitism. That's what this is all about. And I hope that people that are able to think for themselves appreciate that that's what this is all about.
Can I reply? Okay. You say that people who refuse gas chambers in the Holocaust are the same people who say believe in the flat earth. I think it's the other way around. It is the people who believe in gas chambers who believe that the earth is flat. Because the Germans cannot transgress the laws of physics and nature. It was not possible. So it's the other way around. Number two, In the Middle Ages, many Christians believed that the Jews committed ritual murders. They used the blood of Christian children for their Passover feast. Needless to say, that is a lie. But would you call that anti-Christian? It is a lie. It is not anti-Christian to refute that lie. It is not anti-Semitic to refute the Christian lie. It is both of them are preposterous.
Another comment, question?
It's quite clear what's going on to me. You simply cannot admit to yourself that as a German, that German people did this. But man's history is replete with examples of man's inhumanity to his fellow man. And all the Germans did was to simply, arguably in a way, bring it to the industrial age. They did it very efficiently and they killed a lot of people. Now, to try and deny that is to me like saying the moon is made out of green cheese. You can faithfully believe the moon is made out of green cheese. It doesn't change the fact it happened. That's unfortunate that you want to believe that, and it's probably difficult for somebody with German heritage in many ways to say, my God, I can't believe that we, as German people, did this. Americans have a hard time believing that we committed genocide on the American Indian, but we did. Not to the extent, however, that the Germans committed genocide on the Jews. And to say that it didn't happen is to simply delude yourself. There are so many eyewitness accounts. Look at the Nuremberg Tribunal. The leaders of Germany admit that this was the final solution was to liquidate the Jews. Now, you can deny it all you want, and you can say that I'm being delusional, but it's quite obvious who is denying reality here, and that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Can I answer? By the way, I do not believe that the moon is made of blue cheese. And again, I look at the facts. The facts are the facts are the facts. And by the way, something else. Oh, I mean, you are on an ego trip. Now, needless to say, sure, the Americans, we committed genocide on the Indians, but not to the extent as the Germans. So we were bad, but just so bad. The Germans were very bad. That is simply an ego trip.
Okay, another comment, question?
Do you believe denial of the Holocaust should be taught in Marshfield public schools?
I'm very glad you brought it up. Okay. The Marshfield school system has lots and lots of Holocaust books. In 3 books, there is the line, the Jewish Blacksburg from the knife, that is in the hospital zone. I just translated to you, it is not in there. But there is a vast literature of books which refute gas chambers. Now, I want to bring these books into the Marshfield school system. What we have now is indoctrination, one side only. One-sided education is indoctrination. 2 sides is education. That's why I'm running for the school board. What was your question again?
Do you think denial of the Holocaust should be taught in Marshfield public schools?
It should be taught. No, just bring the books into the library. Let the students make up their own mind. Yes?
Okay, how many people were killed in the World War II?
How many altogether?
That the Germans killed? That you believe?
I do not know. There was a war going. A war means kill, kill, kill.
But how many do you believe that were killed in concentration camps?
Okay, there is a figure, as I told you. The Russians released the Auschwitz death books. The number of Jews killed in Auschwitz, not killed, died in Auschwitz was some of them might have been executed, was 74,000. Now that looks like a large number, but you have to realize that Auschwitz was a huge military, a huge industrial complex. It was huge, it was a city. Okay, so this does, and also you have to realize the epidemics between suicide. So 74,000, that is the number for Auschwitz. Now I would say in the camps within Germany, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald and Dachau, I do not know how many. Now you would have to go to the English and the American archives. How many of them died at the end?
Well, what I don't understand is why you're arguing this point. Even if there wasn't 6 million killed, there was a lot. And are you excusing your country for doing this?
Now that's a silly question.
Why? Why is that?
Because why would I excuse anybody being killed? How do I look? Do I look like a murderer?
Well, why are you?
Okay, look, I tell you something. Many people tell me, especially in the German news media, the German news media, again, the German news media writes in German, but that's about it. Okay, the German news media says, well, don't riddle with figures. What difference does it make if just one Jew was killed or 6 million Jews? It doesn't matter. One Jew is too many. Well, I agree with that. But then why say 6 million?
Well, why not? Why are you excusing the ones that were killed?
Did I?
What does it matter if it's 6 million or
one?
If we're wrong in the numbers, what difference does it make?
It obviously does matter. Otherwise, the 6 million figure wouldn't be hammered into us relentlessly. So it must matter.
Okay, am I correct in stating that you said soap is made from lye and fat?
Right?
My grandmother told me about the soap which was brought in, which had the initials RJF on it, and I believe that it stood for Reinstuden Fett.
Yes.
Which means, I think, dirty Jewish fat. Am I correct in
No.
saying that? What does that mean?
It's the numbers which are, it's RIF. It's not RJF. It's RIF. And I think it stood for Rice Industry Fett for Arbeiter. Remember it was I, but Jew is spelled as a J, not an I.
So that stood for what?
Once more. RIF. On some of these bars, on soap bars, it's RIF, not RJF. That RIF stood for Rice Industry Fettverwerbung. It had nothing to do with Jews. Otherwise, it would have said RJF and not RIF.
I have a question in writing. What is the real reason you are trying to convince believers in the Holocaust that it is not true?
Okay. Maybe some of you remember the Pittsburgh affair. That was 1982-83. I read an article in the Chicago Tribune by, I think, Ellen Goodman or Beck, I forgot now. And in this article it said, we are not going to hold it against the new generation of Germans that their parents were criminals. All I can say to that, my parents were not criminals, I am not the child of criminals, and my children are not the descendants of criminals. That's why I'm doing it.
Another question, comment?
Taking the logical extension of your response, who then is responsible for perpetrating this hoax? Who benefits from this hoax, and how is it financed? Would you please answer those three questions?
Okay, who benefits from the hoax? Okay, very simple. Mostly the state of Israel benefits from the hoax. If you do not believe me, okay, let me tell you that the German government by the year 2000 will have paid more than 200 billion Deutschmarks to Israel. Israel benefits. It's blackmail. It's real blackmail. I just read in the German news, in a German magazine of Focus, which is a new magazine and seems to be somewhat uppity, that 250,000 Eastern European Jews want either to go to Israel, the United States, or Germany, and that the Germans are pushed to provide pensions for these people, which would amount to 2.4 billion DM. That's who benefits.
I'd like to thank you, Mrs. Miller, for coming this afternoon, and all the rest of you for quick department and also for your interest in the topic. Thank you very much.